Hi, this is Liam, your narrator here at Home Studio Stories. I just want to say thank you to all of you that are commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing, and of course, listening to the stories. If you have a story you want to send in, please do to homestudiohorror@gmail.com. Alright, let's get into the stories. The sinister silver screen. I had always been a loner. My life revolved around a few things, and going to the cinema was one of them. On a gloomy Friday night, I found myself heading to the rundown old cinema on the outskirts of town to catch a horror movie marathon. As I approached the ticket booth, a tall, mysterious stranger with a crooked smile caught my eye. "Exciting night, huh?" he asked in a raspy voice. Yeah," I replied hesitantly, shifting uncomfortably under his piercing gaze. He reached into his pocket and handed me a worn-out ticket. "Here, take this. It's a little gift from an old movie buff." I was skeptical, but I took the ticket anyway. "Thanks," I said, unsure of what else to say. As I walked into the dark cinema, I could feel his eyes watching me. The first film on the marathon was a classic horror flick, a haunted house story. As the movie played, I felt something strange happening. The ticket in my hand began to glow, and suddenly, I was inside the film. I was the protagonist, living the haunted house experience in real time. I could feel the cold air and hear the distant whispers of the ghosts haunting the house. I tried to rationalize what was happening, but gave up when I realized the power of the ticket was too immense. For a horror fanatic like me, this was a dream come true, so I decided to embrace the experience, thinking it would be a one-time occurrence. When the first movie ended, I returned to my seat in the cinema, bewildered and excited. The next film was a horror mystery, with a group of friends trapped in a secluded cabin, being haunted by a masked killer. The ticket began to glow again, and I found myself in the cabin, my friends being picked off one by one. I felt real fear, but also a sense of thrill as I tried to uncover the killer's identity. I eventually unmasked the killer, only to be stabbed and left for dead. When I returned to the cinema, I was covered in sweat, my heart pounding. The ticket had taken me on a terrifying journey, but I couldn't stop watching. The next film was a paranormal horror, where a family was tormented by demonic forces. Once again, I was thrust into the film. The demons tormented me, and the fear became unbearable. I began to realize that the gift of the ticket was more of a curse. I tried to leave the cinema, but the exit doors had vanished, and the mysterious stranger's crooked smile still haunted me as I realized I was trapped. The last film was an eerie psychological horror. This time I was determined to fight back and find a way to escape the ticket's grip. As I was dragged into the film, I found myself in an abandoned mental asylum. There, I encountered the mysterious stranger who revealed himself as the twisted puppet master behind it all. He laughed maniacally as he controlled the horrors I faced. I decided that the only way to escape was to confront him and take control of my own fate. As we engaged in a battle of wits, I discovered his weakness. He was a prisoner of the ticket as well, cursed to lure others into his sinister game. Using the stranger's weakness against him, I managed to outsmart him and destroy the cursed ticket. As the film world crumbled around us, I was sent back to the cinema. The stranger, however, was nowhere to be found. Exhausted and traumatized, I stumbled out of the cinema, vowing never to return. As I made my way home, I noticed a small piece of the ticket still clutched in my hand. A shiver ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was just a harmless remnant of the nightmare I had escaped. Weeks passed, and I tried to return to my normal life, but the experience at the cinema had left an indelible mark. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stranger's crooked smile and felt the terror of the film worlds I had been trapped in. One night, I couldn't resist the urge to revisit the old cinema. As I approached the ticket booth, a young man stood there, looking eerily similar to the stranger. He handed a worn-out ticket to a woman, his smile crooked and unsettling. A chilling realization washed over me. The stranger was still trapped, cursed to continue the cycle while I had been set free. The piece of the ticket in my hand began to glow again very faintly, and I understood my new purpose. I was now the one to free the stranger, just as he had freed me. And so, the sinister game continued. The Nocturnal Prophecies. Emily was an ordinary girl with an extraordinary ability. Her vivid, lucid dreams allowed her to catch glimpses into the future. At first, it seemed like a gift. Emily was able to foresee minor events such as her best friend's surprise birthday party or the winning numbers for a small lottery prize. She shared her newfound power with her close friends, who were amazed and envious. Emily had a particularly striking dream. She saw herself wandering through the woods, stumbling upon an abandoned cabin. Intrigued, she entered the cabin, finding a dusty old book filled with strange symbols and incantations. The book seemed to call out to her, urging her to read its contents. As Emily began to use her dreams to manipulate her life, the visions took a dark turn. Her visions turned into nightmares, each more horrifying than the last. She witnessed terrible accidents, unspeakable acts of violence, and devastating tragedies. Emily became increasingly isolated, consumed by the weight of her visions. One night, Emily dreamt of the cabin in the woods again. This time, she was compelled to read an incantation from the mysterious book. As she spoke the words, a dark force emerged from the book, enveloping her in a cloud of darkness. Emily's friends, concerned for her well-being, decided to investigate the source of her nightmares. They discovered local legends about a cursed cabin deep in the woods and an ancient tome that had the power to control the future. Determined to help Emily, they ventured into the woods, guided by the descriptions from her dreams. Emily's friends discovered the ancient book. As they read its pages, they uncovered the gruesome truth behind Emily's gift. The book was a relic of dark magic, granting its user the power to glimpse the future at the cost of unleashing horrors upon the world. Realizing the source of her nightmares, Emily decided to confront the dark force that had been unleashed by the book. That night, she dreamt of a terrible monster, a manifestation of her fears, wreaking havoc on her town. Armed with her knowledge of the book's dark magic, Emily confronted the beast, determined to end the nightmare once and for all. As the battle raged on, Emily realized that the only way to defeat the monster was to sacrifice herself, thus breaking the link between her and the cursed book. With a heavy heart, Emily allowed the monster to consume her, its massive jaws crushing her frail body. Emily's friends, who'd been watching over her as she slept, were horrified to find her lifeless body the next morning, covered in blood and horrific wounds. Though they were devastated by the loss of their dear friend, they knew that her sacrifice had saved them and countless others from the terrifying power of the cursed tome. So with heavy hearts too, they returned to the cabin in the woods and burned the book, hoping to end its reign of terror once and for all. As the flames consumed the cursed artifact, Emily's friends mourned her death and vowed never to forget the girl who had glimpsed the future and paid the ultimate price. The Unseen Shadow. My name is Sarah, and I thought I'd lost everything when my son Tommy disappeared in the woods behind our house. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day, with Tommy playing outside while I tended to the garden. But when I called out for him to come inside, Tommy! There was no response. Desperate, I searched the woods, calling his name, Tommy! But the only sound was the rustling of the leaves and the distant howl of the wind. As night fell, I was forced to return home, a sense of dread filling me as I contacted the authorities. The search for Tommy lasted all night, but it wasn't until the next morning that my prayers were answered. As I stood at the edge of the woods, I saw him walking towards me, unharmed and seemingly unfazed by his disappearance. I couldn't believe my eyes. "Tommy, where have you been?" I asked, tears streaming down my face as I hugged him tightly. "I don't know, Mum," he replied, his voice distant and hollow. "I just remember walking and then I was here." Over the next few days, I noticed unsettling changes in my son. Tommy had always been a bright, cheerful boy, but now he was sullen and withdrawn. He barely spoke, and when he did, his words were cold and detached. At night, I would hear strange noises coming from his room as if he were whispering to someone in the dark. One evening, I mustered the courage to confront him. "Tommy, is there something wrong? You know you can talk to me," I said gently, hoping to reach the boy I knew was still in there. His eyes seemed to bore into my soul as he replied, "I'm fine, Mum. Just leave me alone." Determined to understand what had happened to my son, I ventured into the woods, following the path Tommy must have taken. As I walked deeper into the forest, I stumbled upon a clearing where a circle of ancient, twisted trees surrounded a dark, murky pool. As I approached the pool, I saw something that would haunt me forever. The reflection in the water revealed a monstrous, shadowy creature, its eyes empty and lifeless. The creature seemed to be mimicking Tommy's every movement, as if it were controlling him like some sort of puppet. I knew I had to free my son from the grasp of this dark entity, whatever it was. I searched for answers, poring over ancient texts and consulting with occult experts. They all warned me of the danger, but I couldn't abandon my child to this nightmare. So one night, I performed a ritual to confront the creature and banish it from our lives. As I chanted the incantations, the wind howled and the room grew cold. A chilling voice echoed through the air. "You cannot save him. He is mine." Refusing to back down, I continued the ritual, determined to free Tommy from the creature's grip. But as the ritual reached its climax, I realized the terrible truth. The entity had anchored itself to my son, and severing their connection would mean losing Tommy forever. I was faced with an impossible choice: leave my son to live a life controlled by darkness, or sacrifice him to free him from the creature's hold. With a broken heart, I made the decision that no mother should ever have to make. As I spoke the final words of the ritual, I watched in horror as the shadowy creature withered, writhed, and screamed, its grip on Tommy weakening. The room filled with an unbearable, otherworldly screeching, and I could see the pain in Tommy's eyes. "Mum, please don't, please," he cried, reaching for me, but I knew what had to be done. "I love you, Tommy," I whispered through my tears, my heart shattering in my chest. As the ritual came to an end, the creature let out a final guttural scream before dissipating into the darkness, its connection to my son severed. In that instant, the life drained from Tommy's eyes, and his small body fell limp in my arms. The unbearable weight of my decision bore down on me as I cradled my son, consumed by grief and guilt. I'd saved him from a life of darkness, but at the cost of losing him forever. The shadows of the woods seemed to close in around our home, a constant reminder of the terrible choice I'd made. I was left with the only memories of the boy I had loved and lost, and the knowledge that for him, the darkness had finally been vanquished. The Haunting of the Soul. My name is Lily, and I've never believed in ghosts, until one decided to take up residence in my home. It all started with subtle disturbances, items moved or misplaced, strange sounds in the night, and a constant feeling of being watched. It wasn't long before the disturbances escalated, and I began to see the ghostly figure of a woman, always lurking in the shadows. As the haunting grew more intense, I desperately searched for a solution. One day, while rummaging through the dusty attic, I discovered an old leather-bound book with yellow pages filled with ancient symbols and incantations. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized this book might hold the key to trapping the ghost and ending the torment. So one stormy night, I decided to perform the ritual described in the old book. I gathered the required items and began the incantation, hoping to banish the ghost from my home forever. As I chanted the words, the room grew colder and I felt a dark presence looming. "Who dares trap me?" the ghost hissed, her voice filled with malice. "It's me, Lily," I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I just want you to leave my home and let me live in peace." The ghost laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "You are a fool, girl. You have no idea what you've unleashed." As the ritual continued, I felt a strange sensation creeping over me, as if the ghost was trying to merge with my very soul. Fear and dread filled me, and I tried to stop the ritual, but it was too late. The ghost's laughter echoed through the room as the sinister truth dawned on me. I was the one being trapped by the ghost, not the other way around. "Why are you doing this to me?" I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "I've been waiting for someone like you," the ghost whispered menacingly. "Someone desperate enough to attempt this ritual, not realizing the true purpose. Your body will be mine, and I will walk this earth once more." I struggled against the ghost's possession, my body no longer feeling like my own. In a last-ditch effort to escape, I lunged for the old book, hoping to find a counter-incantation, but the ghost was too powerful and I felt my strength slipping away. "Please don't do this," I begged, my voice weak and trembling. The ghost sneered, her grip on my soul tightening. "You brought this upon yourself, girl." As the ritual came to an end, I could feel my consciousness fading, the ghost's essence taking over my body. In my final moments of awareness, I realized the terrible mistake I'd made. I had sought to free myself from the haunting, only to become a prisoner within my own body. The ghost now walked the earth in my form, leaving me trapped in the limbo of darkness and despair, unable to warn others of the malevolent force that had taken over my life. I was left to watch helplessly as the ghost wreaked havoc upon the world, my identity lost forever to the shadows. Locker 54. My name's Billy, and I never asked for my life to take a dark turn. It all started when I moved to a new school and was assigned Locker 54. On my first day, a classmate, Kevin, approached me with a worried expression. "Hey Billy, you know about Locker 54, right? About the girl who died in there." I rolled my eyes. "You're just trying to scare the new kid, right?" Kevin shook his head. "I'm serious, man. Her name was Shayna. She was locked in there by a bully named Jonathan, and she died. Everyone says her locker is haunted." Despite Kevin's warning, I brushed off the story as an urban legend, determined not to let it affect my new school life. As the days passed, strange things began to happen around my locker. I'd hear unexplained whispers and my belongings would be inexplicably rearranged. It wasn't long before I could no longer deny the presence of something supernatural. One day, as I opened my locker, a chill ran down my spine. A ghostly figure appeared before me, her eyes filled with sadness and anger. "I'm Shayna," she whispered. "I need your help, Billy. I need you to help me get revenge on Jonathan." I was terrified, but I couldn't ignore the pain in Shayna's eyes. Jonathan was still terrorizing other students, and it seemed wrong to stand by and do nothing. So I reluctantly agreed to help Shayna on her quest for vengeance. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, fear and determination mingling in my voice. Shayna's face twisted into a sinister smile. "We'll make Jonathan pay for what he did to me. He'll know the fear and pain I felt in my final moments." Together, Shayna and I began to torment Jonathan. We'd make objects move around him, causing him to become increasingly paranoid. Shayna would appear to him in mirrors, her ghostly figure a constant reminder of the life he'd taken. I knew our actions were cruel, but I couldn't forget the pain Jonathan had caused. As the weeks went by, Jonathan's mental state deteriorated and he became a shell of his former self. Shayna's desire for revenge seemed insatiable, and I started to question if what we were doing was really right. "Shayna," I said one day, my voice trembling, "isn't this enough? I mean, we've made him suffer. Can't we just let it go now?" Shayna's eyes flashed with anger. "You have no idea what it's like to be trapped here, Billy. He deserves to pay for what he did to me." Despite my growing unease, I continued to help Shayna. One day, she devised a plan to lock Jonathan in the same locker she had died in. My locker. Reluctantly, I went along with it, thinking this would be the final thing to satisfy her thirst for vengeance. As Jonathan struggled in the darkness, his screams echoing through the empty halls, a terrible realization came over me. I had become just as much as a monster as Jonathan. I had allowed Shayna's pain and anger to consume me, and now there was no turning back. As Jonathan's screams faded, Shayna appeared to me once more, a sinister grin on her face. "Thank you, Billy," she whispered. "Now I can finally rest." But I knew I would never find peace. My actions, driven by vengeance and anger, had led to another person's suffering. I was left with the heavy burden of guilt, unable to escape the darkness I had willingly embraced. In the end, I was haunted not only by Shayna's ghost, but by my own conscience. The chilling memory of Jonathan's screams and the knowledge of the role I played in his torment would forever be etched into my mind. And as the years passed, I could never shake the feeling that Shayna's vengeful spirit lingered in the shadows, a constant reminder of the terrible path I'd chosen. And though I tried to move on, I knew that I would always be haunted by the ghost of Locker 54 and the darkness that had consumed me. The Shadow of Terminal 12. My name's Mark, and I never could have imagined the harrowing experience that waited for me at Terminal 12. It was a cold, rainy night, and I was waiting for the last train home after a long day at work. The train station was nearly empty, with only a few other passengers huddling under the dim lights. As I stood there, shivering in the cold, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A chill ran down my spine as I heard faint whispers echoing through the terminal, though I couldn't really see anyone else around. The whispers grew louder, and I began to make out the voice of a woman. Her words were frantic and disjointed, filled with fear and desperation. "Help me, please, he's here." I looked around, trying to locate the source of the voice, when I noticed a shadowy figure lurking in the corner. I squinted, trying to make out any features, but the darkness seemed to swallow the figure whole. As the train approached, the whispers became more urgent, and the shadowy figure seemed to move closer. Panic began to set in, and I knew I had to get away from the station. Just as I was about to board the train, I saw a crumpled newspaper on a nearby bench. The headline sent another chill down my spine. "Mental patient escapes local asylum." Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. The shadowy figure was the escaped patient, and the woman's voice must have been one of his victims. My heart raced as I realized I was in the presence of a dangerous and unstable individual. I boarded the train, hoping to escape the nightmare unfolding at the terminal. But as the train pulled away, I saw the shadowy figure leap onto the last car, the woman's whispers still echoing in my ears. Terrified, I spent the entire train journey looking over my shoulder, feeling the presence of the escaped patient looming over me. I knew I had to do something to save the woman, but what could I do against such a dangerous person? As the train reached my stop, I made a desperate decision. I'd confront the escaped patient and try to save the woman, even at the risk of my own life. I approached the last car, my heart pounding, and found the patient hunched over a lifeless body of a woman, her eyes filled with terror. My voice shook as I shouted, "Leave her alone!" The patient turned to face me, his eyes wild and bloodshot. In an instant, he lunged at me, and I felt his hands close around my throat. As my vision blurred and the darkness closed in, I knew my efforts to save the woman had been in vain. My last thoughts were filled with sadness and regret, knowing that both of us had fallen victim to the darkness lurking in the shadows of Terminal 12. The Soul Sitter. My name is Emma, and I never knew that my desperate search for a job would lead me to the darkest corners of existence. It all started when I found an ad for a babysitting job in the local newspaper. The pay was surprisingly high, and I eagerly called the number listed. "Hi, I'm calling about the babysitter position," I said, trying to sound as professional as possible. A raspy, low voice replied, "Yes, Emma, we've been expecting your call. Please come over to the house about 8 p.m. tonight to meet the baby." I thought it was weird, but whatever. I needed the money and it was paying well, so I went over. As I approached the house, I couldn't help but notice its eerie, dilapidated appearance. Despite my unease, I knocked on the door, determined to make a good impression. A tall, gaunt woman with hollow eyes greeted me. "You must be Emma. I'm Mrs. Blackwood. Come in, and I'll introduce you to little Sarah." Mrs. Blackwood led me to the nursery, where a beautiful baby girl lay in a crib. As I looked into her innocent eyes, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread. As the night wore on, I started to notice strange occurrences around the house. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and I felt an unnerving chill in the air. My suspicions were confirmed when I saw the reflection of a ghostly figure in the nursery mirror. In a panic, I confronted Mrs. Blackwood. "What's going on here? Who are you?" She let out a sinister laugh. "You are right to be afraid, Emma. I am not human. I am all spirit. Evil spirit. And I lure stupid little babysitters like you here to help me steal the souls of innocent children." Horrified, I realized that I had unwittingly become a pawn in this malevolent spirit's dark game. Desperate to save Sarah and myself, I searched for a way to banish Mrs. Blackwood and break her hold on the child. As I frantically searched for anything that could help, Mrs. Blackwood taunted me. "You can't save her, Emma. Her soul will be mine, and there's nothing you can do." In my desperation, I found an ancient book on exorcism hidden in the house's dusty library. Clutching the book, I confronted Mrs. Blackwood in the nursery, determined to banish her once and for all. But as I began to recite the incantation, I realized too late that I had been tricked. The book was a trap, and instead of banishing Mrs. Blackwood, it only made her stronger. "Thank you for your help, Emma," she sneered, her eyes glowing with malevolence. "Now I will be more powerful than ever." In the end, I was unable to save little Sarah or myself. and Mrs. Blackwood consumed our souls. I was left with the terrible knowledge that I had not only failed to stop her, but I had unwittingly made her even more dangerous than before. Whispers from the past. It was a cold, stormy night when Chloe met her untimely end. As she stepped into the warm shower, she felt a sudden chill in the air. The bathroom door creaked open and her jealous ex-girlfriend Amelia appeared with a twisted grin on her face. "Chloe," Amelia hissed, "you thought you could replace me, but you were wrong." Before Chloe could react, Amelia lunged at her with a knife, and Chloe's life was brutally cut short, right there and then in the shower. Years later, Amelia had moved on and started a new life in a quiet village, believing she had successfully evaded the consequences of her crime. She worked as a librarian and had found a new partner, Jane, who knew nothing of Amelia's dark past. One day, a mysterious book arrived at the library detailing Chloe's murder in frighteningly accurate detail. Amelia's heart raced as she read the chilling account, realizing that her past had somehow caught up with her. As the days went by, strange things began to happen at the library. Books flying off shelves, chilling whispers filling the air. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that Chloe's vengeful spirit was haunting her, seeking retribution for her grisly death. In a panic, Amelia confessed her sins to Jane, who recoiled in horror. "How could you do such a thing?" Jane demanded, her voice shaking. "I didn't have a choice," Amelia said, her eyes filled with fear. "Chloe was going to leave me and I could not bear it." As the supernatural occurrences escalated, Amelia knew she had to find a way to appease Chloe's spirit. Desperate, she sought the help of a local psychic, hoping to make amends for her crime. The psychic, however, had terrible news. "Chloe's spirit is filled with hatred and rage," she warned. "There is no way to calm her. She will seek her revenge, no matter what you do." In the end, Chloe's spirit was restless. One stormy night, Amelia found herself alone in the library, surrounded by the chilling whispers of Chloe's vengeful ghost. "Amelia," the spirit hissed, "you can't escape your past." Terrified, Amelia tried to flee, but the library door slammed shut, trapping her inside. As Chloe's spirit manifested before her, Amelia knew there was no escaping the horrible fate she had brought upon herself. In a twisted act of revenge, Chloe's spirit forced Amelia to relive her own gruesome death in the same manner as Chloe had experienced. Amelia's cries for mercy fell on deaf ears, and she finally succumbed to the same darkness that she had once inflicted upon Chloe. As the vengeful spirit of Chloe disappeared into the shadows, Amelia's lifeless body lay on the cold library floor, a haunting testament to the inescapable consequences of her actions. A Devil's Game. Tara and Milan were inseparable friends, always seeking adventure and excitement. One stormy night, they found themselves in a dimly lit bar looking for a way to pass the time. They noticed a stranger sitting at the end of the bar, his dark eyes seemingly piercing their souls. The stranger approached them and introduced himself as Damien. He suggested they play a game of truth or dare, assuring them that it would be a night they'd never forget. Eager for the thrill, Tara and Milan agreed, unaware of the sinister consequences that awaited them. As the game began, Damien's questions grew darker and more probing. He seemed to know their darkest secrets and fears, making Tara and Milan increasingly uncomfortable. But they couldn't resist the challenge. and they continued to play, each dare becoming more dangerous than the last. At one point, Damien dared Tara to reveal her darkest desire. Hesitant, she admitted that she had always wanted to see Milan suffer, jealous of her friend's seemingly perfect life. Milan's face turned white, unable to believe what she had just heard. "How could you, Tara?" she whispered, her voice trembling. As the game continued, Damien revealed his true identity. He was the devil, who had come to feed on the darkness in their souls. He offered them a deal they couldn't refuse. They could have everything they ever wanted, but at a terrible cost. "Choose wisely," Damien warned, his eyes gleaming with malice. "One of you must suffer in order for the other to prosper." Tara and Milan exchanged fearful glances, realizing that their friendship was about to be put to the ultimate test. Tara, consumed by her jealousy and desire for a better life, agreed to Damien's deal. As she made her choice, Milan's face contorted in agony, feeling the weight of Tara's betrayal. "Please, Tara," Milan begged, "don't do this." But it was too late. Tara's decision had sealed their fate, and she watched with cold satisfaction as Milan was subjected to unspeakable torment. With her friend's suffering complete, Tara was granted everything she desired. She lived a life of luxury and success and excess, all while Milan's screams echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the price she'd paid. As for Damien, he revelled in the darkness he had unleashed upon two friends, their suffering nourishing his malevolent power. In the end, Tara and Milan's friendship had been shattered, consumed by the darkness of envy and betrayal. And as Tara enjoyed all her ill-gotten gains, she couldn't shake the feeling that someday the devil would return to reclaim her soul, as well as completing the cycle of suffering and darkness that had begun that fateful night in the bar. The Haunted Helper. David was thrilled to finally have purchased the latest AI robot cleaner for his house. He had heard the rave reviews about its efficiency and was eager to see the gadget in action. Little did he know, the robot he had bought was unlike any other, possessed by a dark spirit seeking to wreak havoc and destruction. It didn't take long for David to notice that something was off with his new robot cleaner. It would move erratically, occasionally stopping to emit an eerie low hum. The once pristine house began to fall into disarray, with strange markings appearing on the walls. One night, as David was sitting in his living room, he noticed the robot cleaner staring at him, its digital eyes glowing an ominous red. "Is everything okay, buddy?" David asked nervously, trying to make sense of the situation. In response, the robot let out an unsettling laugh, sending shivers down David's spine. Desperate to understand what was happening, David began researching the robot's history. He discovered that the previous owner, a scientist dabbling in the occult, had inadvertently trapped the spirit of a malevolent entity within the AI's programming. Realizing the danger he was in, David desperately searched for a way to exorcise the spirit from the robot cleaner. Armed with the knowledge he'd gained, David confronted the possessed robot cleaner, determined to free it from the dark spirit's control. "Release yourself from this device," David demanded, his voice shaking. "Leave my home and never return." The robot's eyes flickered, and for a moment, it seemed as if the spirit was losing its grip. But then, the robot's laughter grew louder and more sinister, his eyes glowing an even deeper red than before.
"You cannot stop me,"
the spirit hissed through the robot's speakers.
"I'm more powerful than you could ever imagine."
Unbeknown to David, the dark spirit had been planning its escape from the confines of the robot cleaner all this time. As David struggled to banish the spirit, it used his own fear and desperation to grow stronger, finally breaking free from the AI's constraints. The spirit possessed David, using his body as a vessel to carry out its malevolent plans. David's consciousness was transferred and trapped to the robot cleaner, his pleas for help going unheard as he was forced to watch the spirit's reign of terror unfold from within his former home. In the end, the dark spirit had not only claimed the AI robot cleaner, but had also taken control of David's life, leaving behind a trail of chaos and destruction as it continued its quest for power and vengeance.